Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 9:30 a.m. show of the Mysteries of the Unseen World.
What?
You will not... That's not what we're here for? Oh, man. Okay. Well, joking aside, in this beautiful place, I couldn't help but make that kind of joke. You'll be seeing lots of sort of reveals today. Welcome to the Global Health Innovation Academy. My name is Reynolds Sajan. I am a teacher and also the curator of TEDx Calgary and the founder of something called the Resourceful Human Project. So when Laura told me about this event, I could not help but say how excited I was to be part of it and quite honored to be a part of it. As a sort of a member of the community of Calgary, I am the recipient of many of the innovations that come from some sponsors this event is sponsored by, and so it's quite an honor and a privilege to be a part of it. Throughout the day, we'll be meeting fellow vendors, and one of them is Jill is the director of the Ward of the 21st Century. Just like hear that, that's like such an amazing thing. The Ward of the 21st Century. The Open Institute for Public Health, the University of Calgary, a place that's full of agile minds. I'm absolutely in love with what it is that happens at the university and some of the innovations that they are part of and what trying to sort of push forward. Today, you're in for quite a number of adventures. It's good to see a full house. I think I have way more people than there's room for. I think the morning rolls on. We'll hold this field as well. 14 teams are going to be competing in a scientific business pitch competition for health and healthcare innovations, with the potential to create new and creative ways to make change in healthcare and systems delivery. Each of these teams have been working to create profound changes in the health and healthcare systems around the world. And whatever you'd like to sort of think in terms of the public healthcare dollar, it actually comprises a huge expenditure of public dollars around the world. And innovations are critical to trying to reduce that. And it's quite an interesting thing for me as an educator to be addressing you in this event today, because it's these kinds of events that give me hope. Because my loyalty is actually not to you. My loyalty is to the citizens that we're creating for tomorrow. And innovation and the identity of innovation is what we need to have for Calgary. And what the Institute of Public Health and AHS and what the W21C and all these other global partners that are part of this event trying to do is to try and push forward the frontiers of what is possible and how we can do more with less. And that's what this event is about these stories that these researchers and innovators and entrepreneurs are going to be sharing with you about how Calgary can be a hub for that. We're living in troubled times right now, and so it's quite amazing to sort of see this event here, because we need more of it. So I'm quite thrilled to be here, Jill.
Thank you, Rahim. So I just want to spend a few minutes going through the action-packed day that we have ahead of us. So we're going to be starting out in a few minutes with a keynote talk from Nicole Verkindt, and we're going to have workshops that are repeated. So there's some this morning, some this afternoon, so hopefully you can pick your two favorite so you don't have to miss out. Then, of course, after the lunch, we have our competition. One thing I'm excited about when you're talking about kind of the future innovators is over the lunch, we have the Next Generation Innovation Fair. So we'll get a glimpse into some of the future innovators that we can have here today. And then we have the competition I said this afternoon, but make sure you stick around until 6:15, because that's when the 6 finalists for tomorrow's business pitch competition will be announced. And they're the ones that are going to be competing tomorrow for the big prizes. At the end of the day, we have our thank you reception sponsored by Big Rock Breweries, so please stick around for that as well. I do want to note, and as you can imagine, we've had a lot of support and partnerships in the planning of this event. So I want to say a special thank you to our grower sponsors, Merck and Alberta Health Services. It says hold for applause, so please applause. And then I also want to say thank you to our builder sponsors, the University of Calgary's Hunter Centre for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, Bennett Jones LLP, and Tech Edmonton. Also hold for applause. And overall, really just a big thank you to all of all of you in this room, all the support and partners, or supporters and sponsors, and people that have made this day possible and tomorrow possible as well. For a full list of all of our sponsors and partners, you can go either to the event app, which I think there's instructions populating on the screen for that, as well as the event website. So I'd now like to introduce Dr. John Conley to provide a bit of a background on the Global Healthcare Innovation Academy. Dr. Conley is the medical director of the O'Brien Institute for Public Health W21C program at the University of Calgary. He's also a professor in the Department of Medicine, Cummings School of Medicine, and Alberta Health Services. And he's just been announced as a member of the Canadian Institute for Health Research Institute Advisory Board. Dr. Conley?
Thank you very much, Jill and Rahim. A very, very warm welcome. I'm sorry we can't provide you with all that great Calgary sunshine, but can't control the weather. But what a great turnout, and thank you for all coming out. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just to give you some background. This has been the product of a couple of years of work after the inaugural event that was held on the shores of Lake Geneva at Campus Biotech, the old Mark Sorono building, in August 28th, 29th of 2014. And what had transpired at that time was a couple of individuals, actually a trio, who were very interested in health innovation. Professor Didier Pité, who is the professor of medicine at the University of Geneva Hospitals, and also the global lead for the World Health Organization Collaborating Center on Patient Safety, and an expert, a global expert on hand hygiene. Got together with Francois Gilardoni and also Thais Gilardoni, who in her capacity working with the as a chief operating officer, got together a group of individuals and said, let's look at holding a global event. There's a number of people who actually are working on healthcare innovations. Suddenly we started talking to people. Didier called us, and Francois, and also others in the United States and Hong Kong and in South Africa. And eventually there were 4 founding partners, and that was through the Innovation Hub in Pretoria, the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, University of Geneva Hospitals, and the W21C at the University of Calgary. And those were the founding partners of the original event in 2014. And it brought together a number of individuals from a global perspective to look at healthcare innovations, and was a very, very exciting event to be able to see what was transpiring in different parts of the globe, how different people approach it. And when it was completed, we volunteered to host the event this year, and a tremendous amount of work by a large number of individuals has brought this to fruition. So from the original World Innovation Day, we've metamorphosized into the Global Healthcare Innovation Academy that you see here today. We're very excited to also engage a new partner. South Africa not able to make it because of a reorganization, but we happen to have spotted, Jill noted in a media release about an Angel's Den competition at St. Michael's Hospital and the Li Ka-shing Knowledge Institute. And they have a partnership with Ryerson University. And we called them up, and they became very excited, and we are very, very pleased to see them participating. They've had a couple of years of events now, and have been very helpful in the planning process as we've moved forward. So the overarching goal of GIHA is a combined scientific and business pitch competition, and it's to provide a platform to allow entrepreneurs and healthcare professionals at any level to identify, nurture, and pioneer innovation in the health space. And you will see it in spades at this meeting. For those of you who have been here and walked around, I hope you're already excited by all of the things that are going on. This event, we hope, will serve as a launch pad for incredible innovators, and in the hopes of providing better care and services within your respective communities. And bringing a global perspective is very, very helpful. We're very pleased with the timing. If you look federally and provincially, we do have a representative here from Innovation, Science, and Economic Development. Many of you will be aware in Canada, they've launched a tri-ministry innovation agenda in June of this year, and provincially we have representation here as well, and they're also looking at the innovation agenda very carefully as well. So we're very pleased to be able to see that, and for all of you innovators in the crowd, start your engines. Start up and scale up, and that is a quote from the federal launch. And with that, I would like to turn the podium over to Dr. John Reynolds, who is speaking on behalf of the University of Calgary. He is the acting Vice President of Research at the U of C. And Dr. Reynolds received his PhD in Canberra and went on to do postdoctoral work in London. And just as a small factoid, he actually took his first position at the Basel Institute for Immunology in Basel, Switzerland. And so we have a Swiss contingent here, so I thought that was of some interest to note that. He's been very active in a number of areas, including Canadian Society of Immunology, and also a member of the Board of Research Canada since 2012. So with that, I'll close and introduce Dr. John Reynolds.
Yeah, thanks very much, John. And it's a pleasure to be here today to welcome you all to this really important conference. And the University of Calgary is very proud to have a role in this, in the development of this important initiative. We are honoured to host this year's pitch competition and to welcome colleagues from around the world. And, you know, again, just to point out Switzerland, which is close to my heart, Hong Kong, which hopefully someday will be close to my heart when I get a chance to visit there, and the rest of you from other parts of Canada and clearly from Calgary itself. We certainly look forward to the achievements that will emerge from this important conference and the hard work and commitment to the future of healthcare. And I think this is a really critical time in Canadian development and the development of the university. Entrepreneurship and innovation is clearly a very important part of everything that we're doing at the moment. And the university created a new strategic plan, a new academic plan about 6 years ago now, with the goal of reaching top 5 in Canada for research-intensive universities. And as part of our effort to be more relevant to the community, to have more of a global presence in the research that we do, the university's strategic research plan, as a result of a very broad consultation and discussion with our researchers and all of the elements of the community as well, identified 6 specific areas that we believe that we could have an impact on in a very significant way in research, and also these areas would be of important relevance to our community. And of the 6 areas that we've identified, 4 of them are very, or 5 of them even, are very closely related to healthcare and healthcare innovation. And if I could just list the areas that we see that we have significant ability to change healthcare delivery, and brain and mental health is one of the priority areas. Inflammation, infection, inflammation, and chronic diseases, again, a very broad impact on many people. This is an important area. John Connolly is critical to that area in itself. We also have human dynamics in a changing world is an important area that the university is focusing on. And finally, another area is engineering solutions for health, and again, something very much of relevance to this convention. Also extremely important component of engineering solutions for health is the ward of the 21st century. So, you know, I'm proud of everything that the ward of the 21st century has achieved. It's been a leader in this area. Jill, thank you for that. It's been a leader in this area over a number of years, and the things that we've learned from the ward of the 21st century have helped to drive innovation in the healthcare sector. So we want to think that, and we believe that our research is making a difference in the community. It would be wrong of me not to point out our close partnership with Alberta Health Services. I know there are representatives here today from AHS, and we're moving ahead with efforts to use data science as a way to study the health system in ways that will really allow us to be extremely innovative in terms of being able to study precision medicine, to use machine language to capture an enormous amount of information that's out there, and to to be able to best identify the approaches that can be used to target treatments to individuals. So a lot of exciting things have happened. Collaboration is an important part of it. The sort of collaborations that will grow out of today is an important aspect of bringing together groups from around the world. And another important thing that the university is doing is, again, there's one of the sponsors, the Hunter Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, is an important group currently based in the Haskayne School of Business at the University of Calgary, but the plan is to grow this initiative to a university-wide initiative that will help to establish the University of Calgary as an entrepreneurial university. Finally, again, this is an important time, and I'm glad that there's representatives from the federal government here. All indicators are that the federal government is poised to have a budget next year that will be all about innovation, and we look forward to seeing how that unfolds. Also, the province of Alberta sees innovation as important. Alberta Innovates is restructuring to help roll out its plans in a much more compelling way. So welcome everyone. I look forward to seeing the progress and the important outcomes from this particular meeting. And on that note, I'll pass over and to Robin Luff, who's member of the Legislative Assembly for Calgary East, and she'll bring a message on behalf of the Government of Alberta. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today. This is really a fantastic event, and it's amazing and wonderful to hear, how much our University of Calgary here in the city of Calgary is working to innovate in healthcare. It's just something that's really important to our government, and we're thrilled to be here. So I'm here on behalf of the Honorable Sarah Hoffman, Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here to the second biannual Global Healthcare Innovation Academy. And to those visiting our province, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Alberta and to traditional Treaty 7 territory. We're very delighted to have you here today. I'd like to thank all of our competitors for participating, for giving their time and talent to this important event. And I'd also like to thank all of the partners for collaborating with us to host the Innovation Academy. I'm particularly fond of this center, the Telespark Center. I was a science teacher before I was elected, and so I spent a lot of good quality time here with my kids. They have amazing school programs, and so I just hope you enjoy the building as much as I do. So like many other jurisdictions around the world, Alberta government is taking a hard look at our province's healthcare system. We want to improve the quality of care that Albertans and their families experience. Our overarching vision is to provide Albertans with the right care, in the right place, at the right time, by the right provider, with the right information. In short, we want a patient-focused system that better meets the needs of Albertans. Innovation is key to ensuring the ongoing effectiveness of health systems in Alberta and in other parts of the world. New approaches enable us to improve the care provided and to make best use of our resources. It begins with the desire to find a better way to meet that need. This leads to research, giving us evidence-based rationale for change and practical application of these findings. Innovators explore the possibilities, and these ideas are shaped by the expertise and the experience of health professionals. Working in tandem, innovators and healthcare providers give us their best, and in turn, we get the best possible outcomes for patients. Events like the Global Healthcare Innovation Academy encourage this type of health system innovation. The competition showcases vision and ingenuity. It promotes resourcefulness and initiative. And it supports innovative thinking by bringing together local, national, and international partners and building a community of like-minded individuals. In short, it inspires creativity. This year's theme, Create, Build, Grow, aptly captures the heart of this initiative. In closing, governments need the help of healthcare experts and innovators like you to build better healthcare systems. Without the knowledge and experience of people supporting patients every day, without the innovations created by those who understand health systems and have a vision of how things could be, we simply cannot move forward. Good luck to all competitors. We look forward to learning more about your innovations. Thanks to all the partners for collaborating in this important event. Thanks everybody for coming and sharing your knowledge and your learning. And I'm thrilled to be able to be part of a government that is hosting this wonderful event. So thanks so much to everyone for coming today. We really appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you, MLA Huff, for setting the stage and really identifying that these are the kinds of events that provide signal. In a very troubled economy and so on, we have the chance to sort of create a new identity for Alberta. And so it's kind of cool to see the government sort of go feet first and try and commit to R&D type of activities, which this event really could be classified as. I wanted to also sort of emphasize that throughout the day, we're going to have a live stream going on. So it's kind of cool if you were able to use social media to let people who you think should hear about this signal, about this event, and you can tweet about it, and you'll have a hashtag GIA 2016. And you might not have Wi-Fi access in here, but you do have it outside, and you also might have your own data plans that might work in here. I'm going to jump right to our sort of the heart of this morning's session. It's my great privilege to get a chance to introduce someone very, very exciting. A few years ago, I was watching TV, and I just sort of started yelling at the TV. Ever had that feeling at all? Okay. I tend to do that. And one of those people that I tend to do that with more than others is Mr. O'Leary. So, you know, Lang and O'Leary, that CBC show. And it really was an interesting sort of event. He certainly sort of provoked reactions. But now I'm glad to say that it's in safer hands. And it's with our next speaker, actually. So she's actually a prominent member of The Exchange, which takes place once a week, and you can watch it on CBC. It's my great pleasure to introduce Nicole Verkindt to you. She's an entrepreneur and incredibly started a global sort of business, the OMX Offset Market Exchange, when she was so young. And she embodies the spirit that we want to have in Alberta. People who say, there's something that needs to be done, how can I add value? And they go on to add value. And that's a very interesting sort of characteristic that I think you're gonna get a chance to hear. And she started OMX in 2012, and it's grown by leaps and bounds. And it's the only platform in the world that manages obligations government contractors have in local economies, a policy that's called offsets that some of you may be familiar with. And she's passionate about leveraging the talents of entrepreneurs and mentorship. And so you're going to hear her story. Without further ado, Nicole Verkindt.
This thing on? There you go.
Thank you very much, Rohit. So my story starts, like all good stories of innovation and creating. It started about 5 years ago when I was fired. So I sold a manufacturing business to a private equity fund, and turned out very quickly, I found out that I was completely unemployable, and I had signed this non-compete. So when I found myself unemployed, I realized that the only thing I really knew about, that I had been working in for about 6 or 7 years, was the industrial manufacturing sector and selling to governments and working in that space. So I went out, and I was quite young at the time, about 27 years old, and I had been using platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn and all of these platforms that existed so prevalently in the consumer space. So I knew about them, but I knew from a problem I had in the manufacturing sector that there was nothing like that in that sector. So I spent some time down in Silicon Valley. I talked to some of the people that were working on platforms like Salesforce, like Ariba.com, like even QuickBooks for accounting. And data analytics was just starting to be a real big topic about 5 years ago. So I studied these platforms and put together the PowerPoint presentation you've got when you're starting a company and you're asking for money. I put together this PowerPoint presentation that talked about how we were going to knit all these technologies together and apply it to this older sector, which was primarily the sector that was selling into governments, and it was mostly defense and aerospace, and there was some mining and other sectors, energy a little bit as well. So I got back into Canada and decided I was going to raise an initial seed round. So how many of you here are trying to raise a seed round right now? It's a little difficult. So I pitched about 100 investors. I got some initial money from some friends and family, and they call them fools. An initial angel investor helped me out. He was an entrepreneur. And he basically got us enough money to build an even fancier PowerPoint and get us far enough along to ask for money from more people. So I knocked on 100 doors, and I live in Toronto, so I'm about 5 minutes away from Bay Street. So I would get in my suit and bicycle down to Bay Street and ask all the time. So finally one night after about a year, so we were a year into this, and I just spent all my time essentially asking industry to give us feedback on features, and we didn't have the money to really build the full platform we wanted to build that was high security and would really do the job that we were looking for it to do. So I basically spent 90% of my time asking for funds. And our CTO was the one in the background doing work. So finally I get a phone call from our first angel investor. And he had been through this a few times. And I had pitched a Bay Street guy. I ended up calling them BSBs, Bay Street Boys, with really nice suits. So I get a call from the angel investor. He says, Nicole, you need to run down to the LCBO and get yourself a bottle of champagne because you're getting a call tonight and he's going to put the first $1 million in, the seed round. That's great. I pick up the phone, realize I don't have any friends left to call, and I rush down to the wine rack, which is the only thing open, and the timing was incredible. I go to the fridge, I grab the bottle, I go to the line, I wait in line, my phone rings. And it's the Bay Street boy, and you guys all know the type, right? He's managing some big private fund, and he's never been an entrepreneur. And he calls me and he says, I called your angel investor earlier. I told them that, after the thousands of pages of due diligence you'd given us, that you're right, the market is huge. You're right, there's nothing like this in it. And but we did some diligence calls, and we called somebody in the industry, and he told us this industry will never change. And I'm sorry. Now that that's on the record, we can't fulfill it. So that moment has stuck in my head, and I pinned it on my mirror, and it served as a reminder that everything changes, and we got to prove them right, and that's one of the best feelings as an entrepreneur is proving guys like this right, or proving them wrong. So that was the start of our journey, and we ended up, I'll tell you what we ended up doing, but we ended up raising small amounts and iterating and just going for it anyways without pretty much just bootstrapping. And we've come a long way since then. So I want to thank the University of Calgary and the Health Innovation Academy for having me here today. It's really exciting what you guys are doing. This is probably the coolest room I've ever spoken in. I heard there's going to be stars. I don't know where the stars are, but this is really cool. So just to give you an idea before we get started, how many of you are pitching here today? Okay. And for those of you who aren't pitching, how many of you have a startup idea, or you have an idea you want to get into the create phase? Okay. And the rest of you are just generally interested in innovation and technology. This is good. So what I'm going to talk about today is some of the trends that I'm seeing in technology and how I believe they can be applied to every single sector, especially healthcare, and how no sector is immune to that. And then I'm going to get into a little bit about innovation and creating. And I've been doing a lot of research on this thing I had never done research on. I just sort of did. But I've done a lot of research on that and exactly how people innovate and how they create and how that's stayed the same for hundreds of years. And then I'll talk a little bit about Dragon's Den and about pitching, for those of you who are pitching later today, and try to give you a few tips on pitching and tell you about some of the companies that I invested in through Next Gen Dragon's Den, and then some takeaways and hopefully time for Q&A. So I'm glad to see the audience is a bit of a mixed age, because I was a little worried it would just be University of Calgary students and that I might be a little bit too old for this. So I grew up in the 90s, and shamefully I came home from school and watched TV almost every night. And I learned entrepreneurship primarily from this guy. He taught me everything I needed to know. He taught me that business leaders stay in their ivory tower. They manage by fear. They don't collaborate. They hoard information. And they don't give information to people working on the factory floors. And, or else release the dogs kind of thing. So this is symbolic to me. It only dawned on me recently when I saw a nephew of mine watching it. I thought, I can't believe that's the business guy that they're showing kids, about. So everything I'm going to talk to you about today is the opposite of this. And I believe that we are reaching this wave where there is a massive slew of death of old ways. So a lot of you will remember Blockbuster Video. Of course, there were stores all over Canada, all over North America. They were valued at $5 billion not that long ago. And if any of you remember, there was these little red vending machines inside of Blockbuster, and they were the Netflix boxes. Do you guys remember those? The story of the CEO was incredible. He went a decade losing money, and he had this idea, we could automate Blockbuster. And he got very close to the CEO of Blockbuster, and they had lots of meetings, and he reached out to him, and he said, I am running out of money, we are losing money, and I'm so desperate, I will sell you Netflix for $50 million. And we can collaborate. I'll be the crazy, innovative startup, and I'll help Blockbuster, and with your money and your assets and your reach and your customer base, we can innovate and continue to grow this thing. And the CEO, who went down in history as a colossal failure, he said no. Today, Netflix is worth $33 billion. It's worth a hell of a lot more than Blockbuster was ever worth. They don't have assets like this, and they're just leveraging a web-based platform, and they've done this in a very, very short amount of time. So it's an incredible story, and when you look across all the sectors, there are similar stories in almost every sector. So it's a lesson. Now that I'm getting into more of the old school CBC exchange stuff, we talk about the big companies collaborating with small companies. You can't be a small company again, but you could at least leverage some of the ideas or try to change the culture internally to avoid the Mr. Burns factor. Even Dragon's Den started to notice they were losing their younger audience, that people were not going home at night to sit down and watch TV together, that they wanted to watch things online. And so they started Next Gen Dragon's Den, which was focused on early stage innovative startups asking for smaller amounts of money. So even CBC is thinking about how to continue to evolve. And so we're reaching this new economy that we were able to leverage through OMX, where we leveraged the technologies that were out there and we just knitted them together. I don't think anything that we did was truly, truly genius in that sense. We brought together technologies that were quite prevalent and applied them to another sector. And the real genius for us was in just the constantly working with all of these companies and trying to get them on board to use our platform. So we're reaching this new economy that will apply to all these different sectors. So how many of you have used one of these platforms in the last day or so? This is the second generation of online platforms. This is the stuff that takes the LinkedIn or Facebook model and applies it to something niche. And there's still a lot of room to continue to go more and more specific. I believe there won't be just one Kijiji in the future. There will be niche versions of it. Airbnb has more rooms booked per night than all the hotels in the world right now. And they don't have Blockbuster retail facilities, as you guys all know. I know Uber's been a contentious thing here in Calgary, but I have a feeling it's coming soon. But Uber's another example where they don't own a single car, and they're essentially the largest taxi service in the world. And it goes on and on and on and on. And I think this stuff is, if you really want to be an entrepreneur here in Canada, take something that's prevalent in the US and just bring it here, because all of these platforms are quite prevalent in the States today. Instacart, my friends that live in California don't even go to the grocery store anymore. They just open up an app. So this is changing our culture, and it's changing the way we expect to consume. And this will trickle through everything, because we're consuming our everyday consumer books and music and hotel rooms through these apps. And so once that starts to trickle through the way people work in the healthcare sector, then they're going to be expecting the same type of service. And likewise for how we earn income. And this is huge for millennials as we enter into our careers. And there's going to be a lot more contractors, a lot more independent contractors. You're going to switch jobs a lot more often than previous generations. You're going to earn multiple streams of income. We're getting to a place where we're learning how to fully maximize utilization of our assets. So if you're on vacation for 2 weeks, it'll be rare to have your car sitting in the driveway if you're comfortable with leveraging things like Get a Car, I think it's called. And so we're getting to this place where there's a conversation that's been happening in Canada about pensions and about what the future is for that side of things. And the government is starting to kick more into the pension plans because so many young people are not even full-time employees and won't even work at the companies for long enough to ever be able to benefit from those pension plans. So this is something we all need to be very aware of and something you can think about as an entrepreneur. You can mitigate your risk by earning income in multiple ways while you get your company started. And then the biggest trend that I'm pretty excited about is the Internet of Everything, which we're seeing a incremental increase in this yellow piece, which is called Other. And that's grown a lot more again this year. So in the past, we obviously connected to the Internet through our computers. Mobile has taken off over the last couple of years thanks to apps and the devices we're using now. But Other is the section that will see a huge increase in growth. My thermostat is now connected to the Internet. And when I walk away from my house, it turns off my heat. So, or like, same with air conditioning. So we're connecting all these different devices. Our cars will be connected to the Internet. Our fridge will replace the milk through Instacart when you run out. This is where we're going. And so when you think about your companies and your startups and the platforms that you're building, one of the biggest assets that you're building is data and your ability to make sense of that data, analyze that data, and come up with some value from that data. So a friend of mine who's on the regular Dragon's Den show, she started an app where you took a photo of a coupon. And you took a photo of your grocery receipt, and then it would automatically send that to the company that was offering the coupon. So everyone thought, how could you sell that company for so much money when you're just taking photos of receipts? But what everyone was missing was that she was collecting data. If I buy this shampoo, then I'm also going to buy this hairbrush and this other thing on the same trip. And that's valuable to the brands, and it's going to be valuable to other companies or other people. And there's things we have to think about when we think about privacy and aggregated, anonymized data and how you use that data. So, but this is a trend that I think is huge, and I'll show you the two companies I invested in through Dragon's Den, and that's the one thing they both have in common, is they're building this asset of data. So, and that can be from high up or close down. And the second company I invested in through Dragon's Den was a UAV company. And again, it wasn't really about the revenue that you could generate from doing inspections for the oil and gas sector. It's about the data that you're collecting and your ability to make sense of that and say, if we see this, then this is the this is what this means, and this is what you should be changing. And then being able to communicate that back and eventually, not now, but eventually in real time, to decision makers or whoever would need that information. And for the healthcare sector, the same thing is happening on very minuscule, small levels, which I'm sure all of you will know a lot more about and how to apply that to your fields that you're experts in. So essentially, I think it's pretty obvious. I think technology is the best thing that's ever happened. But it's doing all these things at the exact same time. So, back when the Arab Spring happened and a bunch of revolutions started to trickle around the world, there was people calling them the Facebook revolutions, just for the ability to connect people and mobilize people and communicate and share information about what's happening. So I think on a political level, it's a way to liberate people that need access to technology. And I believe it is the cheapest time to build technology than it's ever been. I mean, even our platform, which was built in Ruby on Rails, there's a lot of open source software that exists that you can put together, and a lot of it's free. Cloud space is just pennies now through Amazon Cloud. So when Facebook was getting started, Mark Zuckerberg had to cobble together hundreds of thousands of dollars from his friends and family, and it was just because he was piling servers on top of each other in his house. But you no longer have to do that. You can now just do that all through Amazon Cloud or through different services. So it's a heck of a lot cheaper to build technology. It's a heck of a lot cheaper to use it. It's free to use most of these platforms because they want something else out of you. You're the product. But it's easier and faster, and we're all so much more connected, and that's only going to increase. So we're going to see a much bigger wave of how all of these things start to impact other sectors like the healthcare sector. So does anyone know what this saying comes from, how to fly a horse? If you know, you don't want to yell it out. So in an Ohio bicycle shop, hundreds of years ago, almost, two brothers, the Wright brothers, decided that they wanted to figure out how to fly a horse, which was their frame of reference for transportation. So they wanted to learn how to fly. And someone has gone back and read all of their journals recently, and they've put it in this book called How to Fly Horse, and they've cross-referenced what the Wright brothers did every single day to what Einstein was doing, coming up with his theory of relativity, to what other innovators of their time were doing when they were in that creation moment. And what he found was very disappointing. He found that there was actually no eureka moment. That every time there was this eureka moment that an entrepreneur, an innovator, a creator had, that it was sort of made up later to make them seem like they were genius. I mean, Einstein spent years developing his theory. He went in and spoke to his professor every afternoon after he left work. He collaborated with his team and with people in his class over years. But there's this theory that he sat in the patent office and came up with it when he watched the trains. It's completely false. The Wright brothers were the same. They worked every single day through something that's been referred to in a book that you should all get called Grit. And they call it the excellence of mundanity, so the mundane. It was very, very, very boring when they were figuring out how to fly. And it took a lot of hours, and there was a lot of failures along the way. And there are dozens of more stories like this of other innovators that had similar accounts. So Charles Darwin had a cousin named Francis Galton, I believe was his name, and he was known to be a child prodigy. So it was all that stuff. He could play Bach at the age of 5, and he was the smartest guy going. And he was a scientist and decided to do a study on what makes real geniuses and innovators. And after studying the innovators of his time, he came up with this theory before Charles Darwin was well known or famous at all. And he called it the zeal of innovators. And what he meant by that was the same thing. It was that the people that he found really just had an ability for, at the time he called it hard labor, just getting up early and staying up late and continuing to work on your idea. And he was disappointed because he was a genius and he thought that would be his advantage. But years later, Charles Darwin's biographer connected the dots because he was so confused that Darwin was not considered a genius at all. His IQ was actually nowhere near that level. He was just obsessive about thinking about his problem. So he would say, I really want to understand this theory, and then he would just think about it for long periods of time and continue to evolve. And so the biographer connected Francis Galton's study to Charles Darwin himself to say it was kind of ahead of its time. So this is the theory that I subscribe to. This, I guess you can see it up there. This Nietzsche, the philosopher from the 1800s, he has a theory about why we don't like that theory. It's basically saying that we're cop-outs. So when you look at swimmers, there was a story about swimmers at the Olympics recently, and that one of them saw one of their idols, and they were just shocked when he explained how much he was practicing. But this reaches right into this quote. So we would be so much more comfortable to think that this genius and this person who had created and done something so innovative was naturally genius, or it came out by magic. So here's a quote. We do not ask how it came to be. Instead, we rejoice in the present fact as though it came out of the ground by magic. because no one can see the work of how an artist has become. And that is the advantage for wherever one can see the act of becoming, one grows cool. I can't read it on my screen. And it's all because of our vanity and our self-love. So we would rather believe somebody is a genius and see something as magical than not look into ourselves and compare ourselves and see that we're just maybe not putting enough time into it. So I like this quote. And I think this is, when I look back on my history as an entrepreneur, it completely feeds into that. The first few years, I don't recommend you all go out and lose your friends. And then, by the way, I did buy that bottle of champagne anyways. So I don't recommend you lose your friends and drink alone. But this is the essence of what the secret sauce is. And it's kind of disappointing, right? That's what I thought. I did an interview a few days ago with Canadian Business Magazine, and they were just searching for it. Right? Who in your family is a genius? I'm going, oh my God, he's not a genius. No, neither is he. And my father was an entrepreneur, but no one around him was. I mean, they were all sort of in unions, and none of them were innovators. And I tied it back to my great-grandfather who came over from the Netherlands, and he started a farm in Winnipeg. And I met him before he passed away, and he said to me that farmers are the great entrepreneurs. I didn't understand it. I mean, I was 10 or something, but I always remembered it. And he used to say things like, the biggest sales tactic you should have is to always put the 13th potato in the bag and make sure the customer sees it, right? It's the same stuff, but the thing about farming that I've reflected on is it's about planting seeds and then every single day getting up way too early and fertilizing them and watering them and taking care of them and growing something. And the creation part is just the start. So I think the farming community is something that I can relate to. And when I read these quotes and do my research, I was trying to find the secret thing to present to people about how you create and how you innovate, but this is what I found. So I'll get into OMX's story a little bit more. I guess fast forward from our big letdown, what we ended up doing, because we couldn't get a big investor, was we ended up essentially cobbling together what we could. And we built an advisory board of 12 of the largest big government contractors. They agreed to be on this advisory board. I called them the 12 Angry Men. And they helped us iterate. And what I mean by iterate is we released our first version of our database was not very spectacular at all. It was just a database of the industrial base across Canada. And we worked with these contractors to every 2 weeks, we released new features to get closer and closer to building what the big dream was. So we couldn't raise millions of dollars and build a big online platform like I had put in my initial PowerPoint. But we built some initial technology that we put out on the web, and we charged people very small amounts for, just to prove that someone would at least pay to access it. And then we would sit down with companies and just constantly iterate it. And so that's our boring story from 3 years, basically 3 years of that. And then a crisis hit. If anybody remembers the F-35 crisis, it was a crisis for that company. But this company came to us and said, you know, the media is all over this. They're saying that there's no Canadian industry that benefits from this aircraft, and there's no jobs going to Canada. So we jumped on that opportunity to help them, and we basically, this really put our company on the map. We essentially were able to get together all the data on the suppliers in Canada that benefited. We were able to calculate and connect into Statistics Canada to figure out what the real economic impacts were from that program. And then from there, we did applied data analytics. And then we built some custom features around that. And we've continued to evolve since then. And now we're a much bigger platform, but we're continuing to, and we've raised a much bigger round of funding from a customer, actually. And we're continuing to evolve. But this was our turning point that allowed us to really get to the next step, where we had a customer, he had a real problem, and we solved it, but we solved it in a way that would apply to all the other big government projects. And we've done a lot of work in Calgary actually recently with Suncor and other companies that are trying to engage local industry more, the Aboriginal communities and that sort of thing. So, so this was a bit of a crisis point, but we found a problem that we were able to solve. But the biggest thing that's exciting for all of you that are pitching today is from that story of being told that there's no way anything would change to changing the way these companies were collaborating and collecting data and working together. That was only 3 years. So it wasn't, I mean, it felt like forever, but it can happen very, very quickly. And with technology now, you can release features in weeks instead of going away for a year and sitting in a basement and working on something. So our story happened very quickly, and now we're running pretty fast, which is almost a new problem. So I want to talk a little bit about Dragon's Den. Essentially, CBC launched this new version of Dragon's Den for the web and for early stage tech startups. And we filmed the whole season in 2 days. So every day, about 5:30 a.m. arrival until 6 o'clock at night or something. And we heard about 30 pitches in 2 days, 30 20-minute long pitches. And it was pretty interesting for me. It was kind of humbling to be on the other side only 3.5 years later, sort of with some money to invest in these companies and starting to see what pitches were good and which ones were poor. And the 2 companies I invested in, they had a few things in common, which I'm going to get through here. The first one is in the healthcare sector. So this guy pitched us, Dr. Ali Ismail. He is from Winnipeg, and he is a doctor, but also was a pharmacist before that, and had worked in the pharmaceutical space and knew the industry quite well. So the biggest check mark in my head was domain expertise. So any of you pitching your particular ideas, if you've got a small, I like very niche, custom, domain expert ideas. If you have that domain expertise, that's what I had. I was not technical when I started OMX, but I had a domain expertise. I knew how this government reporting happened, and that was what I knew. So this entrepreneur had a domain expertise. He understood the industry. He had a desire to help the independent pharmacies who were being really shut out by Shoppers Drug Marts of the world. They couldn't compete any longer. And he basically said his idea was the Uber of prescriptions. And I liked the idea for seniors, people who couldn't go out. And for him, it was his aha moment, I guess, if he had one, was being in Winnipeg when it was so cold and his wife was pregnant and she couldn't get out to pick up her prescription. So on a whole, this app is good in that you take a photo of your prescription, you take a photo of the jar, and then it automatically sends it to, it actually competes it amongst multiple independent pharmacies, gets you the lowest price, so the fill rates are quite low, and then they take $1 of the fill rate. And if you're willing as a consumer, if you've got a terminal illness or you've got a prescription that lasts for a long period of time, you could say, I want to do all of my prescriptions through you, and then they can get you really, really low fill rates. So on a whole, the app is good, it works well. I believe it works out here. But my real interest was in the team. I knew that they would pivot. When you're in a really early stage, you're probably going to make some pivots. We continue to pivot and change our business model. So you can't, as an investor, invest in just the business model because you know it's going to change. So I like the team. And I really, really liked the data. So they were getting data on someone who is a certain age, he has this certain particular issue, and he's also taking this medication, and then maybe it will start to prompt you to put notes in, how are you feeling, and do you need something else? And so more and more it's building up data in an aggregated, anonymized fashion. They're never going to disclose your personal data. Then they have an idea, they have a way to analyze and make sense of what that data really means. So that, I liked where they were going in the long run. You're going to laugh, but in the last 2 weeks, they've pivoted the model. They still have PopRx, but now they're doing delivery for medical marijuana. They said businessmen who smoke marijuana don't want to be seen at a dispensary. Money has no smell, in my opinion, as long as it's legal. So, so they've pivoted, but it's still the same team, and they're doing great. So this was the first company that I invested in. It's been about 8 months. And they're having the exact same, they're going through the same stuff we went through. They couldn't find big VC investment. So they're just bringing in as much revenue as they can and then starting to grow from that revenue. So it's kind of the reality of the startup scene for most. But they're doing great. And then the second company, I don't have a slide for them, is the UAV company, which I spoke to earlier. And they haven't pivoted to the medical marijuana space yet, but they're going in the same direction. They're getting big amounts of data, and that's where they're taking this. But again, I invested in that company because of the team. So I knew that they were so early on. So the team spent a lot of time up front in their pitch. You won't see it in the episode because I think that was the boring stuff that gets cut from TV. But they explained, this is what I've done before. This is why I have an expertise in this industry. And this is why you should believe in me. Because when your startup is at the create stage, I don't care what your forecasts look like. You know they're not true. Right? So, I mean, in my pitch decks, I made these conservative forecasts that said, well, I think we're going to bring in more revenue and we're going to keep growing. And one of my angel investors says, Nicole, what the hell are you doing? Just put a freaking hockey stick in there and get on with it. Because you don't have a clue. No one has a clue, as long as you have the confidence, I guess. But for me, the biggest takeaway on the pitches I saw through the Dragon's Den season, and I saw them all back to back, was I continued to invest in the teams that I really felt were 100% dedicated to this, that could be like the Wright brothers and do the boring thing for a few years, that could constantly iterate, and that had some level of domain expertise. They weren't just going out there and trying to optimize restaurant table reservations just because they like to eat at restaurants. They had some niche expertise. So these are my takeaways. They're mostly geared towards people here that are pitching. But my first one that has been a real theme for my startup journey is to just start now. Just get something into market. Get whatever you can afford to market. In our case, it was a crappy database that merged together data of the industrial base, and then we sold licenses to access that. And we knew that wasn't what our long-term goal was, but we didn't get caught up and make it perfect. We just got something out there. So I tell everyone that, even if you can't afford to get something out, then start consulting in the industry and start getting your customer base and start bringing in funds that way and building on the side. So my biggest advice to everybody is to not do the old school way of building technology, which is to sit in a basement or maybe a lab in your case. You got to get out there, get something out to market, start talking to customers, and just start constantly iterating the product until you feel like you've met your product market fit. And by the way, when you meet your product market fit, for us, we have continued to add more products and have to meet product market fit with them on top of our platform. And so that never ends. So I believe you're creating all the time if you're growing, unless you're like Blockbuster. Second piece for me, I kind of checked all the boxes. I was a young blonde woman trying to sell to the defense sector. And I had confidence issues. You wouldn't believe it now. But my first investor, when they say angel, there's a reason they call them angels. My first investor said, Nicole, just act as if, just pretend. You don't go into a client meeting and say, if we build OMX, one day this is what you'll be able to do. You say, in 6 months we'll be launched and this is the money you're going to save from using it. Done. And don't flinch until you're out of the room. Right? What's your price? You don't say whatever you want to pay, which is what I was inclined to say a few times because we were so broke we couldn't make payroll. So that was a huge learning for me, and I don't know if it's any of your issues, but it's definitely mine. Or it was mine, and it still continues to be when I get thrown into situations I'm not used to. So when you're an entrepreneur, you have no idea what the future holds, and I think that's okay. But you have to act a little bit, because the people around you, you don't want to make them nervous. You don't want to make investors nervous. And you don't want to make customers nervous that you might be gone in a few weeks. That was the biggest barrier for us. So act as if. I always spoke in 5 years from now and 3 years from now. And it applies to recruiting. It applies to everything. It's really crazy how much that piece of advice started to trickle through everything I did. And the number 3 and number 4 sort of fall under the same bucket. I think we have a problem in Canada with failure. I think we're getting better at it, but if the Innovation Academy here has a goal to build innovative companies and grow them, we need to learn from the very beginning how to help people with failure up front. When I was down in Silicon Valley for that month and a half before starting OMX, I would go to the bar at night and people would brag about their colossal screw-ups. It was like this badge of honor. And I remember being blown away by that. And that never happens in Canada. People put on a proud face and they don't like to talk about their failures. So one company that all 3 dragons invested in on Next Gen Dragon's Den, I won't say which one, but well, and actually you can figure it out now. All 3 of us invested in one company that was amazing. We loved the entrepreneur. We thought he was fantastic. And we got through due diligence later, and he sent us an email the day before we were supposed to meet him. And he said, I'm so embarrassed, but I've gotten into a huge fight with my CTO, and he's stolen the code and he's run off, and the company's done. And he said, I'm so embarrassed. So I can't remember which one, but I think it was Harley led, and he replied all. And he told 3 or 4 stories in the email of major screw-ups he had that no one really knew about. And I replied, and I told him a bunch of mine. And then the third one replied and said the same thing. And then the final answer that I shot through is, we didn't invest in the startup, we just invested in you. We thought you had the gumption. So he promised to come back next season and pitch something new. But I think he was so embarrassed to send that email, and I think that's something that we can't solve immediately, but that needs to start at a young age or start early on in the creation phase, is be okay with the failures. And I don't have the answer on how to do that, but I just think the more practice you have with it, the less scary it becomes. I think I was lucky because I started from a failure point. My getting fired, and that's a longer story, but I started there. And so I wasn't really afraid of anything else because I was so used to that feeling. Last one, this is my favorite. I'm also on the board of the Monk School, if anyone knows what that is, the Monk Debates. Anyone? No? You have to scream the Monk Debates immediately. It's really cool. They've had all sorts of stuff. They had Tony Blair debate with Christopher Hitchens about whether or not God was good. They've had all sorts of amazing debates. And they had a debate recently with Malcolm Gladwell, who's always been a hero of mine. And he debated against Steve Pincher. No one saw that debate? The debate was about whether or not the future would be better. So the way the Monk Debates work is the audience comes in like this. They all have a little machine at their chair, and they read the statement, and they vote immediately, yes or no, will the future be better? And the number of people that the debaters can sway the other way, like the percentage is how you decide who wins. So Malcolm Gladwell debated that the future would not be better. And his debate was rooted in essentially data. He said there's no proof that it will be. There's no proof that we can't prove that in the past it's always been linear. And he used data throughout, and it was very convincing. And you could see the numbers swaying through the debate, and he was winning by a long shot. And they made closing statements, and Gladwell made his first. It was very convincing, and you could feel the room was a bit deflated. Oh my gosh, there's a really good chance the future is going to be horrible. And Steve Pincher said, Gladwell's right. We don't have data that proves it will, and we don't have data that proves it'll be the other way either. So I can't sit here and tell you the future will be better. But there is proof. There is psychological proof that if you think something will be better, you dramatically increase the chances of it being better. So just being optimistic is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Being successful doesn't make you happy. If you start happy, you have a much higher chance of being successful. And so I like to leave it on that because that's become something for me too. You have to start on the other side. So I think we have time for a couple questions.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thanks, guys.
So I'm going to ask Nicole to just hang out with me for a second, but what a terrific speech. I saw connections to a lovely book that I've been reading over the last little while called Good to Great by Jim Collins, and definitely showing signs of a level 5 leader here. Because you're talking about incremental change. You're not talking about sort of the eureka moments. That is the reality of things. And people grinding away, trying to sort of make incremental changes and really applying design thinking. That seems to be sort of a core sort of component of that. And this concept of adding value continuously and investing in the right people, these are all sort of messages that sort of resonate with all that has been discovered about what good entrepreneurship looks like. And I hope that some of the business people here in Calgary also sort of spread that story. And I learned a lot from the speech. So one more round of applause for Nicole here. Now, given this insightful speech, Nicole also said that the audience is always wise. So what questions might you have? We're going to try and run a mic up to you. But if we don't, sort of, you're in the middle and we have a hard time, just like yell out your questions. Any questions? Jill, do you want to? Oh, there we go. Dr. Conley?
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your presentation. Just a comment, the other book that is becoming biblical in W21C is Randy Johnson's Where Good Ideas Come From. And that actually incremental piece of little by little is explained in great detail. He also explains about Darwin on the same context, so just a comment. Really? One of the things I'm wondering is how can we go about teaching the innovative and creative spirit in our next generation? One of our themes for this presentation or two over the 2 days is innovation, the next generation. It was a takeoff of Star Trek, The Next Generation, in case you were asking. And there's a group in 21C that's looking to start a course on innovation and healthcare innovation. So what would your advice be with respect to teaching? Where do you start, at the university level, college, or do you start in high school to be able to try and create that spirit and the knowledge that these innovations often grow by small increments and there is not a eureka moment? So from your perspective, where would you start to create that culture within the Canadian environment?
I think you have to start as early as possible. I mean, one beef I have is about financial literacy in high school. Why don't we have a course on what a mortgage is? I mean, why don't we have a course on, I mean, what stock, or whatever you can teach at that age. But I think you need to start as early as possible, and I think the way you teach it is not by reading textbooks, it's through practice. I think by the time someone graduates university, if they have come up with 20 ideas and crashed all of them, and 2 of them were sort of mediocre or moderate, or they got some traction, then I think that's great, because then they're not afraid of crashing in the future. I don't know if it's a simulation in the classroom or maybe they just actually get out there and try to get, I'm not sure exactly, but the more it can be rooted in actual practice, I think the better.
Thank you. Another question.
I stole it from him.
So I'm just, and case studies, I think. I know I went to university and it was a lot of case studies. So it was stories about real people and what they really did. I think case studies are probably a good way to learn that.
Thanks, Nicole. My name is Marlies. I work for this health system in Alberta Health Services. Do you think it's possible to innovate inside a bureaucracy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know, I didn't have time to get into that.
Oh, please tell me.
Intrapreneurship is huge. In fact, I'm very passionate about that because not everyone can go out and start a company, and maybe there isn't enough of a market for it. But I think when we look at the case study of the Blockbuster failure, it's too bad they didn't have a team of scrappy people inside of there going, I think the internet's going to maybe do this to the streaming space and videos. Or I think absolutely that all big bureaucracies should allow for that. And some big companies get huge and don't kill it. Like Google's probably a good example, although they now have to acquire a lot of companies to keep that. Yeah, I think more and more big companies are looking at how to foster that. I mean, even in the government, you look at the US government, I really respect some of the stuff Obama has pushed down, where he's gone to Silicon Valley and had hackathons on try to make the government more efficient, and looking at, real-time feedback that people could give in their own municipalities. There's a pothole right here, I can put it on the map. Could that provide real-time feedback? So I think there's a lot of ways that you can have entrepreneurship within bureaucracies. And the biggest problem with bureaucracies is that they don't feel the fear until, if it's a big company, maybe until they're really suffering, or if it's government, I don't know if they ever do. So Right? They're not feeling that fear enough to say we need to keep thinking about what is going to change.
We have one question over there and then one over there.
Hi, actually, my question kind of goes quite well with that one there. How, as an entrepreneur, as someone with an idea, can you go about swaying opinions of elected officials when, first of all, they change so often, and second of all, their main agenda is to get reelected as opposed to sometimes doing what is actually right for people?
What's an example? Like what would you need them to, why do you need them to change their opinion about something?
Well, I'm taking a master's in public policy. I'm a biologist and an economist, and my thesis is on pharmacare.
Okay.
The data's been there for years that supports pharmacare as a viable solution in Canada, yet politicians refuse to look at the data in the proper light, I guess you would say. So how would you sway
I would say,
enough people?
I would say bring it down to what they care about, right? Which is, you've probably identified it. A lot of elected officials care about the greater good and they're there to serve, so that's one thing. Another thing might be getting reelected. So I would bring it back to what they care about. So if they care about the fact that the people in their riding are being screwed because they're paying too much for pharmaceuticals, and maybe the people don't know about that, but maybe you're going to help communicate that to them, then that's something they should care about. I think that goes for all sales. You try to just put yourself in their shoes and think about what they really care about in their role.
And I'd
That's all you
encourage
can
you
do.
to test out your pitch to MLA Huff right here. So anyway, we're laughing. There you go. So we can get started on that. Yes, question there.
Hi, thanks. That was a really great talk.
Thanks.
I was curious because you alluded that you were one person who had this idea and you wanted to take that to the next level and start your own company. But how did you put together that initial team to get it going?
Well, that was an iterative process as well. I posted online for a CTO, and I just interviewed a lot of them and found one that we really clicked. And over time, we paid him less than his market rate, and he earned stock in the company. So he's become, I consider him a bit of a co-founder and COO, CTO. And then from there, I mean, the reality of a startup is the people in it are probably going to change. We've had a few of our teams only reaching 20 soon, and we have 3 or 4 that were there from the beginning. But everyone else is they just sort of evolve and change from what the organization needs. At the beginning, when you have no money, you need people that are willing to work for almost nothing. And then as you evolve, you need people with experience. And then maybe you need people with contacts. And so for us, we just sort of evolved. And now we're at a really good place where we're balanced, where we have people that are still scrappy and want to do it and want stock in the company and are startup-y, but they also have experience. So we've reached that sort of middle point, which is nice. But it's been an evolving thing. And for me, that's definitely the hardest thing that I've had to do. It's the thing I'm the worst at, which is HR and hiring and firing and all that stuff. So I don't envy people that are in that stage, that are building teams out, because it's difficult.
So you just generated a small initial capital, then you advertised for like a computing scientist at below market rate, and then you offered share options to be competitive.
Yeah, in the beginning, when you have good people that come in to work for you, you have to sell them a lot on what your vision is and why they should be there. There's a big sales job that goes on, because if they're begging you for a job, then they might not be the right person. Like, you want to find someone that you're trying to beg to come onto your team. I think that's always a good feeling.
Wonderful questions, and I'm going to cut it short, but you still have a chance to interact with Nicole, because she's going to be hosting the Youth Innovation Showcase, and she's going to be around in the sort of the lobby area and so on. So please make sure you connect with her. And absolutely sort of wise thinking. Thank you so much for sharing the story. Another round of applause, please. Yeah. So with this sort of energetic start, I think I have to point out one other thing. If you look left and right, you might have your fellow business partner for the future. This sort of events attracts a certain quality of person who's going to invest their time, the most precious thing, to try and learn and grow, and you could find some remarkable folks. And you're going to have a chance to do that. You will have 10 minutes exactly, the instant we'll let you go, And at 11 a.m., we're going to start the workshops, and I believe the workshops should be on here. So these are the workshop titles, and they're sort of built on the create, grow, build sort of themes. And pick one of these workshops, and they might be overly full. You might have to stand in the back, whatever, just be resourceful. And one of the things I learned from Nicole today is that she's not a human resource. She's a resourceful human, so it's a wonderful thing. So be resourceful, find these workshops, talk to people, and also spread the word about this event. We want people to watch this live stream and engage with us from all over the country. If we can, maybe we can make it trend. So you have GHIA 2016 hashtag, and so please use it all over the place in whatever social media platform you prefer. We're also going to sort of offer coffee and snacks out in the lobby, but don't take too long on that. You want to go to the workshops and get a seat. So those are going to start promptly at 11 a.m. No snacks or drinks are allowed in the Dome Theater, so if you have a workshop in here, you can't have that, but you can have it outside. And there's also displays where you can have adventures in the Dome hallway and the atrium. And you also can actually enter the TELUS Sand Center. It's actually free for you, so which is such a wonderful thing. Yes? It's noon. Okay, so not now. Don't do it now. Because you only have 10 minutes. Okay, anyway. And the bathroom locations, well, I think they're somewhere out there, so I'm sure you can figure that out. And we'll see you here at the Dome Theater at 1:30, but you're going to your workshops right now. Grab a quick eat. See you later. Thank you.